Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed, pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is Managing Your Nervous System Through Resistance, our 3-step process for when you feel cornered in your parenting. And we all have been there, and we will all continue to return there as we find new levels and new devils in our children's evolution, aka our own developmental phases.
Oh, gosh. You just got it in one there, and I can't get enough of that saying. I mean, even though it's like the bane of all of our existences, right? Like new level, new devil, like new age, new stage, new like new growth, new edge, like just ever evolving.
100%, right?
So the moment you think you might have something nailed, they shift, some other challenge comes in. So yeah, this podcast is said from practice and also a lot of humility, because that's the journey.
Yeah.
How do we show up?
Exactly. So what we want to do is just bring you some of our mama wisdom, hard won, hard learned, and give you our 3-step process, or the 3 steps that we ourselves consciously use and employ. And we want to make it super simple, succinct, and easy for you to remember and utilize yourself. Before we jump into that, maybe we could just quickly pin, I don't know what you think about this, Bridgie, but I had literally one of these moments tonight as I was driving. I was doing one of my trips. Our Monday nights are absolutely freaking a mental case, and I'm sick. And so my brain's kind of not firing on all cylinders, and I have this 15-minute window to drop off 2 different families of kids and get my daughter to physio. And I was thinking about physio, and I missed the turn off to the house, and my son has to be at work in 15 minutes. This is like the whole window just relies on everything running succinctly well.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, Mum," and he had one of those moments, and I instantly went into the whole, I could feel it in my body, but I didn't employ the steps, because sometimes I think there's a moment where you have to have done the thing, and it's in reflection that you go, "Oh shit, that's a thing. Yeah. That's a trigger. That wasn't just a regular day moment." So I just want to reflect that sometimes this is why the fuck up can be so magnificently beautiful, if we're willing to employ enough humility that we can go, wow, okay, yeah, that really happened for me. The way that I responded was not a way that was grounded or regulated. That was definitely a trauma response for me. And for me, what came up is that ungrateful. So I didn't yell or anything, but I kind of took a breath, and as I slow it down in reflection, I can see that I had that fork in the roads moment where I could have just said nothing and just really waited for my body to come back down, or I could pick the other bus.
Which can feel
say something. Which I did. And then regretted afterwards as I was self-reflecting. So I went with the, Heath, okay, but I also now have 8 minutes to get your daughter to physio, plus drop you guys off. And maybe you could think about someone other than yourself in your own world right now. So not catastrophic in this, schema of all of the reactions. But when I was reflecting, I was like, whoa, that felt like one of those moments when my mum came out of my mouth. And when we do those moments on autopilot, I think they can be quite confronting.
Yeah.
So I just want to preface this 3 steps with, you're not ever going to nail it, right? Like, we can all have all of the tools, and still you're not going to nail it all of the time. And still there is perfection there. And still there is beauty there. And often when we're learning, we have to begin like the stumbling toddler, and we fall down the first time before we go, oh, you know what, there's the elephant in the room, there's the thing, there's my next focus to create this 3-step breathing, or I call it like creating space, like breathing room. But to be able to put that in, you kind of have to go, oh, crap. Yeah, that was old. That's not in alignment with me. Okay, what am I going to do differently next time? Because I can recognize there was like feelings before there was the fork in the road, before I chose my action. And it was a reaction. It certainly wasn't one with responsibility. So I just want to preface it just with that of going, I get you. I get where you're at. Sometimes we're going to choose the path that we don't want to choose in order to find the one that we do. And as long as you know how to repair, that's okay.
I love that. And I can say so much about that, but let's launch into our 3 things.
Okay. And then you feel free. You feel free. So step number 1 is what we've called the pause to notice. To notice, what is your reflex? So if we take the example I just gave you with Heath, like even I had that moment before the fork in the road where I'm like, I could see my solar plexus, like that area just above your belly button got super tight. And I can feel myself almost want to grip the steering wheel a little tighter. And I can feel there's part of me that wants to like turn around and devour him.
Yes.
Well, that's not really just me when I'm connected and in my natural state of loving cooperation. That's not me. So there's a part of me here that's wanting to play out a scenario where I've been in pain, and this reaction has been what's been displayed. So I am in some way attaching, well, this is what I do to feel back in power when I feel powerless in this moment. So we have to pause to notice and slow it down that there's things happening in our body. Often what happens is we go, ah, and then you or I, Bridgie, as facilitators go, hang on, let's just slow that reflection moment down. Because there was this and this and this and this and this before you got to that. So if we can just work out what your process is, what your trigger strategy or step-by-step, cobblestone pathway is, then it becomes easier to first become, oh, there's that tightness. Oh, there's that desire to devour. Oh, this is a trigger. Because if you're not aware of something, you can't change something, right? So the first step has to be a pause when you notice that 0 to hero reaction and look at what is my reflex. And can I slow it down enough just to give myself enough space to choose a path that's in greater alignment?
And this can sound like easy, right? Like, oh yeah, you just do this thing. But because some of these triggers can be so deep for us, there can be so many like points that we need to look at and go, oh gosh, and then this happened and I responded like that, and I felt my chest completely tighten, and then I heard these words come out of my mouth that I've never heard before. And it requires the courage to lean in and not collapse into shame when we do a process like this. Because if it's too shamey for us, then we don't want to look at it. And if we don't want to look at it, then it's really hard to change it.
Super hard.
And so even as you're listening, like, because I can feel like some constriction in my chest even just talking about this. So I wonder, even for those of you listening, if you can feel how it feels to consider where you didn't pause, right? And notice how that is in your body and just breathe into that place. that feels tight right now. And to allow it to exist in you, because often too we don't want to be in that feeling either, so we'll just try to do the thing to get away from it. But then we give it power because we're moving so far away from it, we're going to run back into it again.
Totally. I love that reminder too, to breathe into the area that's tight.
Yeah.
Because it's truth. Step 2 is narrate what they want and your experience.
This is like, if I was to like give parents of toddlers, or, you know, any child, but particularly from like, I don't know, almost birth really to like 4 or 5, narrating their experience of what you see that they want or are asking for or seem to be needing is so powerful, both for them to have a sense of feeling heard, but for us to create almost like a tiny pause in our nervous system that can calm our activation. Because what can happen a lot with toddlers and preschoolers is their neediness can feel too much for our system, and we want to resolve the neediness, but sometimes we try to resolve that by being snarky or making meaning about what they're asking for, like whether it might be rude or, you know, whatever label that our kind of programming might put on those needs. But just taking a moment, and I do this with my like nearly 3-year-old constantly through the day, is just, oh, you want water, or oh, you really want that one right now. And when she's in a, like, you know, perhaps she's in a agitated tone, and just me calmly paraphrasing back to her what I heard helps her system like take a tiny breath, and me too have a moment before I then decide what I'm going to do with that information, because we can't always give them everything that they want, but we can hear what they want and we can acknowledge that they want something, and then from there we can then determine, can I meet that, or am I going to put a boundary in place, or am I going to direct elsewhere?
I really love that.
That, and like choosing connection, like when behavior feels hard, have got to be like, I don't know, like parenting 101 for me. Like I just keep going back to those 2 things as like your baseline, and I swear it just makes relating with our children that much more pleasurable and easeful, I think.
Well, it's 100% true, isn't it? Because it's actually in the doing of less and just being the mirror for their experience that you center their experience, and all kids want is to be heard, rather than having your influence kind of, you know, blanketed over the top of theirs.
That's right. I mean, and I may be jumping ahead to the next point, but even the other day, my daughter, my youngest, I made lunch for us both, and I popped it down in front of her and explained what it was, and she just pushed it away like she didn't want it. And I was like, okay, we've got that, or I can make you some avocado on toast. And she didn't want that either, and so she's quite upset. And so I'm just sitting there eating my lunch going, okay, well, it's up to you. And I'm not fussed. There's no activation in my body. She has the choice, and she may or may not choose either of those things, but I'm not attached to needing for her to eat that thing. And so I'm more just creating the space for her to move whatever's there, because is it really about the food, or is it really that the food gives her an opportunity to express some frustration or express some, you know, whatever's in her body. And so this goes on for a few minutes, and I'm just, you know, just chilled. Like I'm just kind of like totally, you know, whatevs. And then she just reaches over, pulls the bowl back, sits up next to me and eats it. And I didn't have, and I think also because I didn't have an agenda, there was more freedom for her to choose what was authentic to her.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I can get this right all the time, but I'm just saying as a practice, it's our attachment to what we need our children to do or be or have that can create so much of our angst in our parenting. And for some parents, the food's not an issue. And for others, it's a really big tension point. Like, pick your like poison, we all have it, right? But just if we can practice that, like noticing if there's any activation and being with it and breathing through it and pausing with it, and also becoming aware of what the story is that you're telling yourself about it, which this leads us into the next point, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think you've segued beautifully, because point 3 is lean back instead of leaning forwards, and in doing, lean back, move your energy backwards and be in a greater space of observation rather than action, and let go of the attachment to the outcome that you have. What I think so much of parenting asks us to do is to trust more and do less. So what does it look like so beautifully to go, okay, the best way I can meet you and be in this experience with you and manage my own nervous system so that I'm no longer in a power struggle with you, which is where that powerless, feeling cornered like a wild animal needing to strike out feeling comes from, is because you feel powerless. You feel like you have no options. So when you remove expectation on outcome, it's like lifting a lid off of a glass box. All of a sudden, there's so much room to move, rather than the perception that there's none and you've got to break free.
Yeah.
So letting go of the attachment that you have and sinking into trust, I just think is a really, it's a bigger practice, like all of these steps, actually, as you said, Bridget, it's a bigger practice than what we perceive, because it's so beautiful to go, just let go of the attachment to whether they eat that food or blah, blah, blah. But it's really hard to do that. Like the actual lived human experience, it's a spiritual one, right? Like spiritually, we're always saying, let go of attachment, let go of separation, let go of right and wrong, let go of your attachment to this or to that. Like it is one of possibly the greatest human challenges across an entire lifetime. So also doing this with compassion, and to the degree that you can manage in that moment, enough that it lifts the lid for you and you no longer feel like a cornered animal, would be what I would say. And even if I can't fully step into deeply trusting that moment, then I just ask myself questions like, what would it look like to so deeply trust him right now? So let's say it's, for older kids, it becomes what seems like bigger life issues. So when they're really little, it can be hard because you're like, well, I need you to eat that food, because if you don't eat that food, then you're not going to sleep. And then if you don't sleep, then I don't sleep. And now I'm sleepless. And now and we just kind of like do this huge cast ahead and go, well, you have to eat the meal now because I can't deal with what I perceive is going to come in the future. So the way to eliminate the fear is to just remind yourself that you trust them in this moment? Yeah. Come back to step 1. Take a pause, take a breath. Wow, this is a thing for me. Where has this come from? Is this a pattern from my childhood where I had to eat everything off of my plate before I could leave? Is this fear of I'm casting forwards going, well, it means they won't sleep? What do I need to be with that? So point 1. Point 2, narrate what they want. Okay, you don't want the avocado and toast. Yeah, I really see that. But I'm not taking it personally. Oh, well, I've slaved all day. I've created these things. You don't acknowledge me. I'm just your servant. I'm not personalizing this. This isn't about me. That's narcissism, a form of it, when we completely go, well, I can't because they'll perceive me in a certain way. I can't do this because all of the things that are about me, and my experience. Versus just being able to go, this means nothing about me.
Yeah.
It's not about me at all. You don't want to eat the avocado. That's cool, babe. No worries. We're still going to go to bed, but it's totally your choice. You don't have to. And just taking away the power that thing has over you in this moment. And food is one of those very complicated things for many of us.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I say that, like I say this knowing that with my other daughter, food's a really big trigger for me with her.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that it can be with one and not the other?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Oh, it's more because Sylvie's a real sweet tooth, and I commented to my husband, I'm like, I must have a really big unconscious like stuff around my mum with food because I can get like really controlling. Yeah,
it's just so good to know, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's just I think because I'm afraid of them developing really poor eating habits, like of like eating that food.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so layered. And I think also when we start to see our children like take different leaps or move into broader circles, and then we can start to project forward, as you say, like of what that could mean and what they might choose outside of our influence. And we come up against, of course, and part of where it's most hard to let go is when it challenges our identity. Okay, if we have wrapped up in our parenting values, that our children, will eat certain kinds of food and they won't eat other kinds of food, and they will associate with this kind of person and not that person, then there's so much like rigidity and inflexibility and triggers, right? Because we're not able to hand over and trust because we've made it mean something about us.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I mean, look, just to maybe add just a slightly future experience for you. I know you with Sylvie, but that was me with Heath too. And I still get ribbed by both of my eldest two children that sugar never touched their lips, refined, processed fibers of any sort never touched their lips for like 3 years. The first 3 years of their life. So it's still something that as teenagers now they reflect on, I can't even say that word tonight. Ruminate on and still like go, oh God, because they obviously then there's two more siblings like, well, you would never have let us do that. We could never have, blah, blah, blah. And I can still remember, I think it's probably even documented in this podcast, when my son was like, I don't know, maybe he was like 6 or 7, and he started sneaking sugar and lollies at school. Do you remember this? I'm pretty sure one of our early podcasts about this. And I had to really do this dig deep process on was this about them or was this about me? And I had totally made it about me and my ego and my reflection of the naturopath who had naturopathic children versus this child that, really was rebucking all of my polarization. So the stronger my polarization, the stronger the challenge from him, because that's, of course, a family dynamic perfection, right? And so it came to this moment where I really had to decide, was I going to continue down this path of my rigid values on sugar, or was I going to trust him and his direction, as I had so many times in his life already at 6? And of course, that was the direction I chose. So I did my own work to decondition myself and regulate my nervous system when I was around him and sugar. And then we created a whole game about it. And then I totally let go. So I did more of the unschooling approach, and I totally let go. And there certainly was a phase where he gorged himself, but now he's 16. And this kid, who I was pretty sure was a hard set sugar addict, like we even joked that he could be totally full with dinner and he would still have a second stomach for dessert, like massive. And yet at 16, when theoretically he should be eating the shittest food, because we kind of all go through that phase when all of a sudden we can get takeout and we have our own money and we're hanging out with friends and, all of that trashing of the body phase. And he literally says no, doesn't want to put those things in his body, makes himself smoothies and juices, and chooses consciously the foods that he's putting in his body, not because he eats granola with Greek yogurt every morning for breakfast, like not because I forced him, not because I've told him that's what he should eat, but I let go, and he has found his own alignment beautifully in that process. So this is what I mean by also timelines, that sometimes the angst that it is in the waiting and in the trusting can be really hard to be with. And that's a lot of years, right? That's like 10 years I'm talking about over a stretch of time from 6 to 16, where he's gone through a phase of gorging and then he's gone through periods of on and off to where he's then found his own autonomous balance point. And in the end, that's the whole purpose of it, right? Is I know health and I know I have choice and I'm choosing it for these reasons for myself, not because I'm being told.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that gives you hope or insight.
That's
maybe.
Yeah. I definitely have let go, but I can still feel the edge of like not too much and like balance and like it's still an edginess for me. That's inspiring to ponder.
Yeah, I was more just like, I get it. And still here's where I ended up, you know. So time is a funny thing for us mums, isn't it?
This podcast is brought to you by Honey Club and Reimagining Motherhood, your spaces for intimacy and feminine embodiment and conscious parenting and inspiring motherhood. Come join us at julietanner.love and bridgetwood.life.
So what I was going to say as part of that lean back is that lean back and letting go of the attachment and the meaning, it's really fucking hard. It's really hard. And the bigger your kids get, I actually think the harder that is to do, even though it seemed like when I put myself back there when, you know, the food at dinner and then sleeping through the night seemed like the world's hardest, most excruciating experience. Oh, my love, I know you can't know when you fast forward, but boy, versus decisions and life choices that can lead to suicide and death and sexual abuse and substance abuse and not finishing school, like versus life choices when they're older, it's a very different state of play. So practice now while the choices are really still totally in your control, even though you have the perception that they're not.
Yeah.
Because there literally comes a point when the practice that you have instilled at 1 and 2 and 4 and 5 becomes the practices that you call upon when the stakes are higher. You don't just randomly parent a 16-year-old. Like it's like the mini conversations you've had every day for 16 years that now you get to fall back on. So the lean back and the letting go of attachment and the sinking into how could I trust you right now and what would it mean to trust that you have everything inside of you that you need to navigate this, and how can I remove my own self from this experience of yours and reflect back you. Like that is a practice, like it's a life practice. And I hear from mums who have adult children that potentially never ends.
Yeah.
So you might as well practice now. So, but by the time you're a mum like me with 14 and 16-year-olds, you have a really solid base that all of you are springboarding off of because the stakes are higher, is what I would say.
Yeah. Gosh. Yeah, certainly for anybody in the, like, on the border of tweens, looking ahead at teens, it does feel like we're just playing small fry, right? Like in terms of the choices, but that they do lay how we're relating lays the foundation.
As I was trying to say, yeah.
It's the relationship that
exactly
what carries you.
Yeah, it seems like this big scary thing, but it's not when you have parented from the place of relationship. But you got to do that shit now.
Yeah.
Because it makes then easier. You find a way to manipulate, control, and coerce now. I'm telling you, you are fucked by the time they're 14.
Yeah. Because, I mean, and I certainly look back at, like, it was my relationship probably with my mother that helped me make better choices.
Yeah.
I think, in hindsight.
Yeah.
And it's not really something that you reflect on when you're going through it necessarily, but it's there. I guess it's like you don't notice it if it's not there.
Yeah.
Sorry, you don't notice if it's there, but you notice the absence of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Relationship is everything, right? So what you're doing in all of these tiny years is not without total merit.
Mm.
You know, I didn't just get lucky. Like these people go to, yeah, but you've got great kids. Do I? Or did I just really fucking invest in parenting? Because it seems pretty fucking lucky to me to have two really great teens.
Yeah.
That seems too lucky to me.
Mm.
You don't get that lucky, you create that. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the tireless effort that you put in now to all of those patterns and all of that hard, excruciating work of meeting yourself for the first time, of feeling like the caged animal in each of those stages for the first time, of trying to work out how the fuck you are going to do this for the rest of your life. It does get easier.
Yeah.
Like that hard work, I promise you it pays off.
Mm.
You know, like there's this midpoint, I think, in mid to late primary school where I kind of went, I don't actually know that there's any difference between the way that I might parent and the way that other people might parent. And I was like, no, it all, like the kids all seem pretty same-ish in their outcomes. But once they get to high school, totally different. So now I'm like, oh, thank God.
I do remember that there was a phase for you where you were feeling that, like you were like...
Yeah, I still think that now though, like grade 3 to 6. I mean, earlier even, like that whole primary school, I don't know that there's a huge difference.
Mm.
There'll be a couple of outliers for sure, but the general bell curve is not a huge difference.
And so do you see where do you see, and we've kind of like deviated a little from the podcast.
We've totally gone off our 3 points.
But where do you, this is like a private conversation we're having publicly, but where do you see then, because I'm fascinated by this, and also because my mum was a high school teacher for 30 years, so her and I would often talk about and notice like families and different kids, and where do you notice the off the rails kids, or the like, because the assumption can be they just come from like a bad home.
Yeah.
But that's not the case, right?
I don't think that's the defining moment on whether your kids are vaping, skipping school, doing drugs, harming other humans. I don't think that that's the defining moment. No, I think it's a contributing factor for sure. I mean, privilege and classism is definitely going to be part of what is accessible to you, and therefore what opportunities you have and what support systems you have in accessing those opportunities. For sure, that's going to play in. But if we're just looking at a cohort of relatively similar socioeconomic backgrounds, so when I look at my kids are in a private school, so that's a particular demographic. That's a lot of privileged white people mostly. So there's less variance there than what you would get in a public school.
Yeah.
So I may have more of a skewed version of events to someone else that's in a different education system to me, based on my experience in the education system that I'm in, which is private and a relatively similar cohort of children. Those who have invested in relationship, the children are completely different. The choices they make and the way that they navigate themselves socially, sexually, relationally, and with the way that they handle the stress or increasing pressures of school and school performance varies enormously.
Yeah. So relationship matters, you know, those mums who wonder if all of this work through the night with the night.
Well, yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Right?
It's so important.
You're continually asked to dig deeper and deeper and deeper of themselves. It's the relationship that you're setting the tone for. And also, you know, like the first 3 to 5 years and the neural wiring that happens, right? Like we're wiring them for safety. To keep coming back to that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it matters.
Yeah. And relationship doesn't ask you to be perfect.
No. And in fact, you know, some of the most beautiful connection comes through the fuck ups because you go back and you do the repair.
Yeah.
Because we're humans, we're always going to emotionally flood. And the tricky thing with emotional flooding is that emotional people, when all of us when we're in that state, the reaction is often shaming. And so there's a deep amount of repair that needs to happen to help the child who we know we have shamed.
Yeah.
But in doing that, we also get to dig deep and unearth and heal our own shame.
Totally.
That we've left long ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So please just know, beautiful listener of this podcast, that, oh Lord, do we see you? Like, we know what it is that you ask of yourself every day and every night. And for the younger version of myself, and I'll ask you in a minute, Bridgie, I would have loved not a guarantee, but just a cast forward or an insight or a thread of hope from a mum who made life choices like me and said, there was this point where I'm so grateful I could cry, so grateful to that self of mine back then who made those choices. And he knew there were no guarantees, and he was told over and over and over that it made no difference.
Yeah.
Who's standing here going, it makes a really big fucking difference.
Yeah.
What would you say to your younger self?
Oh, I would just say, like, and I think probably for so many mums, it's the sleep. It's the sleep that feels like it's going to break you. And the thousands and thousands of hours that I've spent laying with my children or getting up to them in the night, I wouldn't change it. You know, like, just there's a beauty in that, in knowing that there's no guarantees of getting anything back, but there's an enormous richness that we're giving. You know, in listening, in our children being heard, in our safe presence, in us working to create a really beautiful anchor for them. I just keep going, right? I'd say to my younger self, you know, to my, you know, first-time mother self who felt like she was almost drowning. You've got this. Just keep showing up. Show up with your heart. Even though, yeah, as you say, Julie, like, how many people just said it doesn't even matter. They won't remember. Oh, no, they won't remember.
Everyone
says they won't remember.
And the mums who were triggered by the way that I parented used to say, well, there's no guarantees. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah. But I'm trying anyway.
Well, because I've still got to pick my alignment, right? Like, what's that DeMartini quote? I'd rather the whole world against me than my own soul. I can pick something that wasn't a whole-bodied yes from me.
Yeah. I mean, it's that whole thing, like, whatever you choose in life, you're going to be choosing some form of a shit sandwich, right? To be easy. So what do you want to choose? What road do you want to make yours?
Yeah. What's his shit sandwich for sure? On that lovely note.
What's happening in your world, Jules?
Well, I just have to remind you that you can still access the Set Sexy Up download. It's a free 16-page guide that I put together so that you set yourself and your partner up to succeed for shining the light on your intimacy and relationships. I cannot speak tonight. Can everyone? I'm just, apologies. My brain has kind of left my body.
I think you've done remarkably well. I'm feeling pretty average.
Thank you. So you can grab your Set Sexy Up download at julietanner.love/set it up. And you, Bridgie?
Yes, we are still talking all things rage and repair in the Reimagining Motherhood membership. So if you can want to have some more support, want to have a community around you, and just, you know, have a kind of guidepost for your mothering, then please join Reimagining Motherhood. You can find out more at bridgetwood.life.
Magic.
Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.